Peter's first love disappeared after giving birth to their son. To provide their son with a complete family, he found someone who resembled her, me. We've been married for 3 years, and I've always been the woman supporting him and his son from behind the scenes. Kind, considerate, understanding, and most importantly, always emotionally stable. Once, when I went to pick up Leo from school, I overheard him telling his classmates that I was just a nanny and that his real mom would be back soon. I was thrilled. That would be great. If she came back, I could take the money and leave. Chapter 1. Today is Friday, and Peter was supposed to pick up Leo from school. It's their weekly bonding time, and Peter usually takes him to a family restaurant for dinner. This has been their tradition for the past 3 years. Never skipped. But today, Peter called at the last minute, saying he had to go on a business trip and asking me to pick up Leo instead. I rushed from the hospital to the kindergarten. The classroom was nearly empty, with only a few kids waiting for their parents. Leo was surrounded by a group of children, all admiring the longevity locket around his neck. Wow, Leo, your necklace is so pretty. Where did you get it? I want my mom to buy me one too. Leo held his head high, pride gleaming in his eyes. My mom designed this especially for me. You can't buy it anywhere else. Wow. Your mom is amazing. She can make teddy bear cookies and design necklaces. I wish she were my mom. I want your mom too. She's so gentle, but my mom is so strict, except for Fridays and rare exceptions. I'm usually the one who picks Leo up and drops him off at school. Leo is more mature than most kids his age, but he's also a bit withdrawn. I worried he might feel isolated at school, so I often brought handmade treats to share with his classmates. Because of this, Leo is quite popular at kindergarten, and everyone naturally assumes I'm his mom, though he's never called me that. I did make the teddy bear cookies, but I definitely didn't design the necklace. I quietly pulled my foot back from the classroom door. Sure enough, in the next moment, Leo's soft yet unmistakably disdainful voice rang out. She's not my mom. She's just the nanny at my house. My mom is a jewelry designer. She's amazing. The kids gasped in admiration, gathering around Leo to pepper him with questions about his impressive mom. Standing by the back door, I watched Leo proudly bragging about his mom, feeling little more than mild amusement. To some extent, he wasn't wrong, though his choice of words was a bit harsh. Ever since I started living with Peter, taking care of him and Leo became my only job. While the work is akin to that of a nanny, Peter and I are legally married. I'm not just a nanny, I'm a stepmother at best. Leo is Peter's son with Cecilia, a brilliant jewelry designer. But Cecilia disappeared shortly after giving birth, leaving no legal ties to Peter. As Leo grew older, Peter realized the family's incompleteness, so he started looking for a stepmother for Leo, someone to make the family whole. With my face bearing a passing resemblance to Cecilia's, I stood out among the candidates. From the day I entered their lives, Leo knew I wasn't his mom, and I never intended to replace her. After all, Peter and I are in a contractual marriage for 3 years. During these 3 years, he has a stand-in wife. Leo gets a stepmother, and I'll walk away with $30 million. I couldn't say no, I desperately needed the money. Chapter 2. On the way home, I pretended as if I'd heard nothing, keeping up my usual warmth toward Leo, asking him what he'd like for dinner. I've always been self-aware. I only take what I'm entitled to, and I don't concern myself with things that don't involve me. Leo, with his usual stern face, listed off a few dishes. I noticed him swallowing a bit too obviously and had to suppress a chuckle. Say what you will, but my cooking skills are genuinely impressive. Over the past 3 years, the Liu father and son duo have both noticeably filled out. When we got home, Leo immediately locked himself in his room. I didn't mind and headed straight to the kitchen to cook. Once the 3 dishes and 1 soup were ready, I went to call him for dinner. Before I could knock, I heard laughter from inside his room. Leo was on a video call. Since it was on speakerphone, I could clearly hear Peter's voice and another, a woman's. She was calling Leo sweetheart, and Leo was calling her mom. Leo excitedly told her how all his classmates admired his necklace. At first, I thought it was just another trinket Peter had bought to please him, something he's done before. Although Cecilia hadn't been around these past few years, Peter had meticulously maintained Leo's connection with her, preparing for the day she might return to his life. It seemed this necklace was genuinely designed by Cecilia. After 6 years of searching, Peter had finally found her. So, his business trip today was really a journey for love. How romantic. I had no intention of interrupting their family reunion and silently returned to the dining table to scroll through my phone. Only after confirming that Leo had ended the call did I knock on his door to invite him to dinner. After dinner, as I cleaned up, Leo stayed at the table, looking like he wanted to say something but couldn't. Leo was the spitting image of Peter, with the same handsome and dignified features, but his eyes were even more beautiful, probably because they were so clear and pure. They reminded me of someone I once knew, though they didn't quite measure up. Leaning on the table, I smiled at him. "Is there something you want to tell me?" Leo pressed his lips together but eventually said nothing and returned to his room. I didn't mind and didn't feel like prying. My job is simply to ensure he's well-fed, clothed, and taken care of. Anything beyond that is none of my business and not within my control. That night, I wrapped myself in a blanket and sat on the living room couch, bawling my eyes out over a movie. When Peter returned, he found me with a face swollen from crying. He seemed shocked. While I felt embarrassed, I quickly stood up, speaking through my heavily congested nose. "Why are you back so suddenly?" He walked over to me, his gaze calm and soft, his tone gentler than usual. "Why aren't you asleep yet?" I pointed to the TV, watching a movie. He stared at me for a moment, then sighed softly and reached out as if to pat my head. Before I could dodge, his phone rang. The caller ID read, "Cecilia." He stepped out onto the balcony to take the call, and I tactfully retreated to the kitchen. Only after he finished did I come back out. "Peter, let's finalize our divorce next week." Cecilia was back, and our agreement was nearly up anyway. I expected Peter to agree readily, after all. I was no longer of any use to him as a stand-in, but Peter's expression turned icy. "You're in such a hurry to get divorced? I'm busy next week." Without another word, he walked off to Leo's room, leaving me stunned. Our marriage was essentially a contractual employment. He paid me to do a job. Now that the contract was ending and he'd found his beloved, shouldn't we both be eager to part ways? What's with the sudden mood swing? Chapter 3. Peter spent the entire weekend working overtime, leaving early and coming back late. I didn't get another chance to bring up the divorce. On Monday morning, he handed me a small box, saying it was something he'd picked up at an auction. I was in a rush to drop Leo off at school, so I just shoved it into my bag without looking. As usual, I brought some homemade cookies to the kindergarten, where the kids gathered around me, sweetly thanking Aunt Tang. Leo stood silently for a moment, then walked past the children into the classroom. After dropping him off, I asked the driver to take me to the hospital. When I arrived at the ward, Lara was standing by the window doing light exercises. When she saw me, she smiled. "What did you bring today?" I held up the thermos. "Your favorite, pork congee with egg." We each took a bowl and sat by the bed to eat. I pulled out my phone and opened some photos, handing it to her. "This is our house in Nanching. I've already had it cleaned. After you're discharged next week, take Victor there first and see if anything else is needed. Once I'm done here, I'll join you both." Lara looked at the photos but didn't say anything, just nodded. With the bowl in my hands, I turned to the window. Through the glass, I could see the azure sky and fluffy white clouds drifting lazily in the breeze. Willow branches swayed gently. "Ori, we're such a burden to you." I stared at the soft clouds and asked, "Lara, do you think Victor will like the little house?" Lara froze for a moment. Then her gaze softened, and she smiled. "He will. My brother always loved places with lots of wind." I smiled too. "That's good to know." Lara said nothing more, only sighing softly. We sat there by the bed, watching the clouds, the trees, and the sun. The bench outside changed from holding a mother and daughter to a couple, and then to an old man. People come and go in life, always in a hurry. Quietly, I said, "Lara, let's not talk about being a burden. If it weren't for you and Victor, there wouldn't be an Oriana in this world. We're family. We have been for 10 years. That afternoon, After grocery shopping, I went to pick up Leo from school. The teacher told me he'd already been picked up in the morning. Apparently, Leo had left with his mom and dad. Back in the car, I hesitated for a while before deciding to call Peter to confirm. Although it was likely him and Cecilia who picked Leo up, I needed to be sure when it came to kids. Just as I was about to dial, I noticed Peter's WeChat profile picture on my feed with a notification dot. I clicked on it. 5 minutes ago, he'd posted. It was a 3x3 photo grid. At the center was a family photo of the three of them, smiling happily on a beach. They were all wearing matching family outfits. Leo looked genuinely happy, smiling brighter than I'd ever seen in 3 years. Even Peter, dressed in unusually vibrant colors, seemed less stern next to Cecilia, his demeanor soft and relaxed. They looked like a perfect family. Since the post confirmed everything, there was no need to call. With the Lou father and son away, I enjoyed a brief vacation, spending my days cooking and eating with Lara, then wandering around together. It was peaceful and relaxing. Chapter 4. The call from Peter came in the middle of the night. I had already fallen asleep, but the ringing of my phone woke me up. Peter's voice sounded exhausted, with Leo's crying in the background. Oriana, can you come to the children's hospital right now? Peter explained that Leo hadn't been sleeping well these past few days, and after being exposed to the sea breeze, he had suddenly developed a high fever. Now at the hospital, Leo was crying inconsolably and refusing to cooperate. I glanced at the pitch-black sky outside and got up to gather my things. Leo has always been a poor sleeper. When I first came to the Lou household, he would often wake up in the middle of the night crying, and I'd spend hours singing lullabies to soothe him. Although he's improved over the past 2 years, he's still particular about his sleeping environment. Whenever he has to sleep away from home, he needs his familiar pillow, bed sheets, and pajamas, or he won't rest well. In the past, when Leo traveled with his grandparents, I'd prepare everything in advance, since I was always the one handling it. Peter wasn't aware of these details. As I neared the hospital room, I could hear Leo's hoarse cries echoing in the hallway. I had assumed Cecilia would be there, but when I stepped into the room, it was just Peter and Leo. Peter's tense expression relaxed when he saw me. "You're here." Leo lay on the hospital bed, his small face flushed either from the fever or the crying. I asked Peter to hold Leo while I quickly replaced the hospital bed sheets and pillowcase and changed Leo into his pajamas. Then, I cradled Leo in my arms, lying beside him to soothe him to sleep. Gradually, his cries quieted. He nestled against me, his tiny hand clutching my shirt, and mumbled, "Mommy." I brushed his fevered cheek, knowing he was delirious from the fever. "I'm not his mom, I'm just the nanny." After much effort, Leo finally fell into a peaceful sleep. The nurse was able to administer the injection without issue, and Peter and I sat on the sofa to rest. Peter handed me a glass of water and rubbed his temples. "Sorry for disturbing your rest." I shook my head. "It's fine. This is part of my job. When you take him out in the future, make sure to bring his pillow, pajamas, and sheets. That'll help." Peter stared at me for a moment and then asked, "Did you open the little box I gave you the other day?" "Not yet." "Was it something important?" I retrieved the box from my bag on the other side of the sofa and opened it. Inside was a diamond ring. Peter suddenly placed his hand over mine. "Ori, please don't divorce me." Chapter 5. I had no idea what had happened between Peter and Cecilia that would make him willing to give up the person he'd waited for 6 years and instead propose to me. But I was certain it wasn't because he loved me. Peter is terrifyingly rational, someone who always makes calculated decisions after weighing the pros and cons. I wasn't interested in uncovering his reasons either. I've never been one to waste energy on irrelevant matters. I slid my hand out of his grasp and placed the ring back on the coffee table. "Peter, we're just contractual spouses. Now that the agreement has expired, it's time for us to end this." Sitting beside me, he seemed unfazed by my words. Instead, he continued, as if explaining to himself, "Ori, if it's because of Cecilia, you don't need to worry. It's over between us. This trip was only because she wanted to see Leo. We won't be in contact again." These past years, Having you around has been comforting. Leo depends on you a lot. Can't we just continue living like this? I looked at Peter, my expression calm. No, we can't. I don't know or care about what's going on between you and Cecilia, but there's no future for us. I had only agreed to this arrangement with Peter in the first place to pay for Lara's medical treatment. Now that Lara had recovered, I had my own life to live. We were going to settle down in a place where the wind always blew. Peter didn't seem to expect such a straightforward rejection. For a brief moment, there was a flicker of hurt in his eyes. Ori, do you really feel nothing for me? I chuckled. Of course. I do. Gratitude for being a generous employer. And I meant it. Without the $3 million he provided, both Lara and I would have been dead years ago. That's why I dedicated myself to taking care of him and Leo these past 3 years, answering every call and fulfilling every need. But that's as far as it goes. I thought I'd made myself clear, but Peter didn't seem ready to accept it. You don't have to decide so quickly. I'm not in a rush. It's late. I'll have the driver take you home to rest. I'll stay here with Leo. Leo's prolonged fever had developed into a mild case of pneumonia, requiring a few days' stay in the hospital. Peter moved his work to the hospital room and stayed by Leo's side the entire time. Cecilia, however, never showed up. Every day, I cooked at home and brought meals to the hospital. One day, as I was feeding Leo, I received a call from the hospital saying Lara had suffered a sudden brain hemorrhage and was in critical condition. The bowl slipped from my hands, shattering on the floor. The sound startled Leo, who looked at me with wide eyes. Peter had just entered the room. He quickly came to my side. What happened? My hands were trembling uncontrollably, and my mind was blank. Even breathing felt difficult. How could this happen? I had just seen her yesterday. She was fine. She was supposed to be discharged tomorrow. Everything was supposed to be getting better. How? Gripping Peter's sleeve, tears streamed down my face as I mustered all my strength to say, "Take me to People's Hospital." Peter supported me as we left, instructing 2 nurses to stay with Leo and calling his parents to come over. Driving as fast as he could, Peter got me to the hospital in record time. The doctor told me Lara had collapsed while walking in the courtyard. The location of the hemorrhage in her brain was severe, and I should prepare for the worst. Chapter 6. Thunder rumbled outside as torrential rain poured down, washing away the oppressive heat of the past few days and leaving the air heavy with moisture. After 8 hours of desperate attempts, Lara still didn't make it. The 2 lights in my life that had once illuminated my world both dimmed and eventually extinguished. I handled all of Lara's arrangements calmly. Peter offered to help, but I didn't let him intervene. On the day of Lara's cremation, the sun blazed brightly in the sky. I stood by the street, holding her urn, occasionally overhearing passers-by remarking how the skies had finally cleared after days of gloom. It was a beautiful day. I looked up at the sun, dazed, finding it strange that such blazing warmth couldn't touch me at all. I don't know how long I stood there. My feet felt rooted to the ground. Everyone around me seemed to have a destination, but I didn't. I once didn't know where I came from, and now I have no idea where to go. Let's go home. I don't know when Peter appeared, but he led me to the car. Back home, I fell into a deep sleep. I dreamt of many things, fragmented, blurry, a haze of what was real and what wasn't. At some point, I sensed someone sitting by my bedside, reaching out to feel my forehead. The room was dark, with only a faint light spilling in from the doorway. He sat against the light, and I instinctively raised my hand to touch his eyes. He caught my hand, his voice steady and devoid of emotion. "Do I remind you of him?" In an instant, I was fully awake. I tried to pull my hand back, but his grip tightened. "Ori, if you're willing, you can think of me as him. Whatever Victor could do for you, I can too." Victor, that name, which has accompanied me for 10 years. Every time I hear it, my heart fills up all over again. He pulled me from the abyss, only to leave me far too soon, like fireworks, briefly lighting up the night sky before fading into darkness. Where do I even begin with Victor? To me, he was a brother, family, and the love of my life. Chapter 7. Before I turned 13, I was relatively lucky. Though the old orphanage was lacking in resources and amenities, at least it was safe. After 13, Things changed. The orphanage underwent reforms, and conditions improved. There was meat to eat, books to read, but an uneasy feeling constantly hung over me. No matter where I went, I felt a pair of eyes watching me from the shadows. My freshly washed underwear would go missing. Items in the room would mysteriously disappear. Sometimes, at night, I'd feel someone touching my legs as I slept. I didn't dare make a scene, because that person was the director of the orphanage. I endured it for 2 years until the day he called me into his office and tried to pull down my pants. I kicked him and ran with all my might, screaming for help as I went. The orphanage was in a secluded area with few passers-by. Those who did pass were told by the director that I was his daughter throwing a tantrum. No one stopped to help. When I felt him catching up, a water bottle suddenly flew past me, striking the director behind me. His cry of pain rang out. I didn't dare look back, terrified that even a second of hesitation would get me caught. That's when I saw the boy who had thrown the bottle. Grinning, he shouted at me to run faster and asked if I wanted to go with him. I had no other option, so I kept screaming for help. He grabbed my hand and pulled me, running full speed onto a departing bus. The moment the director reached the bus door, it pulled away from the stop. The nightmare was left behind. The boy bought me a ticket, leading me to the back of the bus, where a girl about my age was sitting. She rubbed her eyes and looked at the boy. Brother, how come you brought back a tail after going to the bathroom? That's how I learned they were siblings. They had run away from home to escape their abusive father. Neither of us knew where the bus was headed, but the boy, still smiling, said, "This bus is taking us to a brighter future." Even before we knew each other, he told me that I would have a bright future someday. That first night in the new city, the three of us squeezed into a rundown hostel, sharing a single cup of instant noodles. The noodles were eaten by me and his sister. He only drank the soup. We lay side by side on the bed, unable to sleep, caught between excitement, confusion, and fear. We had escaped our respective abysses, but we didn't know if the road ahead would lead to another one. Out of nowhere, he sat up and asked if we wanted to change our names, saying that today marked the beginning of a brighter future, and our names should reflect that. We picked new names but couldn't settle on a surname. They didn't want their original one, and I had no idea what mine was. Finally, he pointed to a battered copy of the Tang poems, lying on the table, and declared we would all take the surname Tang. Our names, and our fates, tied us together as a family that night. The next day, Victor, his new name, went out and came back announcing that he had rented a place for us. He had saved a little money beforehand and stolen some from his father when they ran away. Though it wasn't much, the place was a tiny one-bedroom in an old neighborhood. But it became our home in the unfamiliar city. Once settled, the three of us started taking odd jobs. We were too young to find proper work, so we handed out flyers, waited tables, and did whatever small tasks we could. Victor, 2 years older than Lara and me, wasn't even of age yet, but he seemed to know how to do everything: cooking, laundry, taking care of us. He was quick-witted and charming, selling products at a supermarket so well that the store auntie often gave him extra groceries. Though life was hard, we were able to eat, and Victor always said things would get better. In the vortex of life, we clung to each other, wobbly but steady. We found comfort in our shared warmth. One day, Victor came home with a piece of meat and said he had good news. A teacher he met at the supermarket was willing to help Lara and me go back to school. We both refused. Lara wasn't interested in studying and had just started an apprenticeship at a beauty salon, which she enjoyed. I, on the other hand, felt too embarrassed. But the two of them took turns persuading me. Lara called me a natural for university, urging me to study hard and repay them later. I knew they didn't want repayment, they just genuinely saw me as family. Sometimes the world feels vast, allowing us to meet only a few people in a lifetime. Other times, it feels small. Thin threads of coincidence can bind strangers together as family. Eventually, they convinced me. While they worked, I went to school, picking up light part-time jobs like shop-sitting so I could study while earning a little money. I quietly saved up, and the first thing I bought was a folding bed for Victor. Since Lara and I shared the bedroom, Victor had been sleeping on the small sofa in the living room. His long legs always dangled awkwardly off the edge. He wouldn't buy himself a bed but wouldn't think twice about buying my school materials. When he received the bed, he ruffled my hair and grinned, his eyes curving into crescents. "Well, look at you, buying your big brother a bed. Guess I didn't spoil you for nothing." I looked at him, my heart pounding, both happy and annoyed. I didn't want to call him brother. Late at night, I would study at the table while Victor lay on his folding bed doing calculations. He'd always notice when my water cup was empty and refill it, or make me a bowl of noodles with a poached egg if I studied too late. He'd watch me with his ever-present smile and tell me I was destined for great things. Once, I asked him why he helped me escape that day. He said he thought I'd been kidnapped because I didn't look like the director's daughter at all. So many people heard my cries for help, but only he reached out a hand. When I started my senior year, the pressure increased, and late-night study sessions became routine. Victor would wait for me outside the school gate every night, holding a warm bottle of milk and 2 boiled eggs, insisting I needed the nutrition. His visits became so frequent that everyone at school knew him. Girls often handed me love letters and gifts for him, asking me to pass them on to my brother. I refused every time, telling them he wasn't interested in dating. One winter evening, a girl handed Victor an apple outside the school gate. He accepted it and even gave her a roasted sweet potato in return. I ignored him all the way home. When he finally grabbed my backpack to stop me, he frowned and asked, "Did someone at school bully you?" "None of your business," I snapped, exasperated. "If it's not my business, then whose is it?" "Oriana, have you grown bold enough to ignore me now?" He stood in front of me, blocking my way, his face dark. "Don't tell me you're dating someone." I pointed at the apple in his hand, fuming. "You can accept someone's apple, but I can't date?" He froze, then laughed, his eyes soft and bright like scattered starlight. Bending slightly, he looked into my eyes and spoke gently, almost coaxingly. "Is my Ori jealous?" In that moment, I realized my feelings for him were laid bare. I tried to escape, but he pulled me into his arms. Through his shirt, I could feel the vibrations of his laughter. "She said she's your classmate, so I accepted." "Didn't I give her a gift in return?" "I just want you to get along with your friends. If it makes you unhappy, I won't do it again." The cold wind brushed past us, but it couldn't cool the warmth spreading across my cheeks. From that day on, our relationship shifted. It wasn't clear what had changed, but something had. We avoided meeting each other's eyes for too long, pulled our hands away quickly if they touched, and left unspoken things hanging in the air. Until one night, as I was drying my hair, Lara asked me bluntly, "Ori, are you dating my brother?" She didn't wait for an answer. "Otherwise, why do you blush every time you look at him?" I was speechless. Was it that obvious? The day of my final exams coincided with my birthday. Lara was away on a work trip, so she joined the celebration via video call. She teased me about a surprise gift waiting on my bedside table. When I blew out the candles, Victor rested his head on his hand, watching me. "Happy birthday, Ori," he murmured. At that moment, I thought my wish was simple, to spend every birthday with Victor and Lara. We split the cake evenly between us. After my shower, I found Lara's gift, a small box that burned in my hands. Victor was standing in the doorway. We exchanged a glance, both turning red. He closed my door, telling me to get some rest. That summer night, the old fan creaked noisily, its sound amplifying the restless heat. Unable to sleep, I slipped out of my room and into Victor's arms. On the narrow folding bed, we pressed close together. He stiffened for a moment, then wrapped his arms around me. "Can't sleep?" Resting my head against his neck, I nodded even though I was already drowsy. He asked where I wanted to go for university. I told him I'd chosen a local teaching college with waived tuition and fees. It was close to home. He cupped my face. "No, with your grades, you can get into a much better school. Don't worry about money. Focus on studying, I'll take care of the rest." I silenced him with a kiss before he could keep talking. I was so nervous I forgot to breathe and nearly passed out. Victor pulled back, laughing softly. "You don't even know how to breathe properly during a kiss. And you're trying to take the lead?" The darkness hid my flushed face as I stayed silent. After a while, he stroked my hair. "Ori, you're exceptional. You should explore the bigger world out there and meet other amazing people. Don't limit yourself. Don't worry about us. I don't want you to regret not pursuing something important in the future. But I shook my head firmly, hugging his waist. Nothing is more important than you two. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying right here. When Lara returned and listened to my thoughts about staying in the city for school, she stared at us like we were the dumbest people on earth. Are you two serious? Ori can just go to school wherever she wants, and we'll all move there. It's not like there's only one city in the world. Love really does make people stupid. Victor and I were too embarrassed to respond. In the end, I applied to a university in the north. Once again, we packed up and headed to a new city. When we left the house we had lived in for 4 years, none of us felt any nostalgia, because as long as the three of us were together, anywhere could be home. Life at university wasn't much different. Lara and Victor worked while I attended classes and picked up part-time jobs whenever I had free time. Lara became a well-known makeup artist. Occasionally, she even worked with celebrities. And when she got autographed photos, I'd sell them to classmates for some extra spending money. Victor continued his sales career, quickly advancing to team leader thanks to his stellar performance. I earned scholarships every semester. Life was getting easier, and every day felt a little brighter. We made a pact. Once we'd saved enough money, we'd settle in a windy place, plant an entire garden of flowers, and adopt 2 cats. We were all striding confidently toward that bright future. But life, in its cruel way, likes to hit you hardest when you think you've finally found your footing. During the second semester of my sophomore year, Victor was diagnosed with a genetic disease. It was an extremely rare condition with no official name. All anyone knew was that it could rapidly deteriorate the body. Treatment was expensive. Lara threw herself into work, taking on as many jobs as she could, while I dropped out of school. No matter how much Victor scolded me, I refused to go back. Humans may not be able to predict the future, but we can sometimes sense its approach. I knew if I didn't stay by his side now, I might never have another chance. Our savings quickly ran dry. I took on more and more jobs, working up to 5 in a single day. All I wanted was to earn enough to keep him with us a little longer. Victor grew thinner by the day, losing not only weight but his sense of taste. He ate less and less. I found a job in a restaurant kitchen, secretly learning how to cook so I could experiment with new dishes, hoping he'd eat just a few more bites. I didn't know what else I could do for him. In his final days, Victor stopped letting me go to work. Instead, he'd just hold my hand, often sitting silently and looking at me. His body was frail, his complexion pale, yet his eyes remained as clear and bright as the first time I met him. On a sunny afternoon, Victor passed away. A life lovingly nurtured for over 20 years was undone by illness in just 6 months. Life is so heartbreakingly fragile. Chapter 9. After Victor passed away, Lara and I lived in a shared silence. The absence of one person left the home feeling unbearably empty. The kitchen no longer bustled with activity, and the familiar, almost chant-like sound of his nagging was gone. I replayed countless memories in my mind. But no matter the moment, the clearest image was always Victor's smiling face and his bright, unyielding eyes, brimming with infinite hope for life. It was those memories that helped me survive day after day without him. Half a year passed, and Lara and I both began to take small steps out of our grief. Just when I was starting to feel grateful that I still had Lara, she broke down in tears and told me she had been diagnosed with the same disease as Victor. In that moment, to my surprise, I felt an eerie calm. I thought, if Lara goes, then Oriana might as well be gone too. We could reunite in the afterlife and be a family again. After all, I couldn't survive alone. But fate offered me a chance. A month after Lara was hospitalized, Peter found me. He was very straightforward. He needed a contractual wife to care for his son, and he'd pay me 30 million yuan for 3 years. It felt like grabbing onto a lifeline. I agreed on the spot. Only then did I realize how desperately I wanted to keep Lara alive. I couldn't bear to watch her wither away like Victor. It would have driven me mad. As long as it meant saving her, I was willing to do anything. After marrying Peter, there were plenty of people who mocked me, subtly or outright, calling me nothing more than a stand-in. That was when I learned how much I resembled Peter's first love. It didn't bother me. In fact, I felt thankful. If I didn't look like her, Peter wouldn't have chosen me. I kept the marriage a secret from Lara, but she eventually found out. She fainted 3 times from crying, begging me to leave her and stop carrying her burden. I held her trembling body, and we cried together. Lara, I've already lost Victor. I can't lose you too. In that moment, we clung to each other, 2 broken souls leaning on one another. In this world, we were the only family we had. 3 years passed. We endured countless sleepless nights and tried every possible treatment, both domestic and international. Finally, Lara's condition stabilized. The doctor said that with regular medication and checkups, she could manage the disease. Just as it felt like dawn was breaking, we were plunged into an even deeper darkness. Chapter 9. I had been feverish for 3 days before waking up in the hospital. Peter told me the fever had been so high that medication couldn't bring it down, so he had to rush me to the emergency room. I nodded and thanked him quietly. We both tacitly avoided mentioning what happened that night. As I sat on the hospital bed, lost in thought, Leo arrived. He stood by the door with a miserable expression, looking as if he had been wronged. "Aunt Tang, are you feeling better now?" he asked, his voice pitiful. I smiled faintly. "I'm fine now. I'm sorry. Did I scare you that night?" He shook his head and stood beside me silently. I didn't have the energy to tease him, so I stayed quiet too. After a long pause, Leo took my hand, tears welling up in his beautiful eyes. "Can you just be there for me? And me alone? You always bring teddy bear cookies for my classmates, and now they all want you to be their mom. But I just want you to be my mom." I looked at him gently. "But I'm going far away, so I can't be your mom anymore. When you miss me, you can ask your dad to bring you to visit me." Leo pursed his lips stubbornly, his eyes full of tears. But in the end, he only murmured softly, "Okay." After Lara's departure, I no longer wanted to stay in this city. That afternoon, Peter visited me again. He asked if I could stay for another 6 months, saying that Leo really needed me. I shook my head. "There has to be a goodbye, Peter," I said, handing him a list I had prepared long ago. "It's a list of Leo's habits and preferences. Whoever takes care of him next can follow it, and there shouldn't be any issues." Then, looking at him steadily, I said, "Peter, let's get a divorce. I want to go see Victor. It's been too long since I've seen him." 3 years had passed. After agreeing to be Peter's contractual wife, I had Victor's ashes stored in a temple. For 3 years, I never dared to step inside the temple gates. I was a married woman, and visiting him in such a state would surely have saddened him. When I missed him, I would only stand outside the temple, looking in from afar. But now it was time to bring him home. I wanted to take him and Lara to the place we had dreamed of, a place with wind, flowers, and peace. Peter sighed deeply and silently took out a divorce agreement. After signing it, I apologized. "I'm sorry for mistaking you for him that night." Peter looked at me, his voice calm and steady, as it had been that night. "Do I really look so much like him?" I shook my head. "When I first saw you, your eyes reminded me of him, but on second glance, the resemblance was gone." "Peter, I've never looked for his shadow in you. You're not him, and no one ever will be." Victor was like the moon through the clouds, the stars in the sky. He had the purest eyes and the most passionate love for life. He was, and always would be, one of a kind. The night before I left for Nanching, Cecilia called and asked to meet me. It was my first time meeting her in person. She was even more beautiful than her photos, radiating a bold, fiery charm, something I couldn't begin to compare to. Honestly, I didn't understand why people thought we looked alike. Apparently, she felt the same. Her first words were, "Who's the blind one that said you're my stand-in? I'm not half as gentle or sweet as you." I thought she wanted to discuss Peter, so I explained that ours was a contractual marriage and that we were already divorced. She simply smiled. "I know, I just wanted to meet you today." After studying me for a while, she sighed and said, "What a pity. In terms of personality, you and Peter would have been a good match. He's as stubborn as I am, and we've clashed so much over the years that we're both exhausted." I didn't quite understand what she meant, but she suddenly handed me a card. "Ms. Tang, I came here today mainly to thank you. I'm a selfish person. I've always pursued my own vast oceans and never wanted to be tied down by family or children. I feel guilty about Leo. I've been a poor excuse for a mother. But you've taken such good care of him these past few years. When I met him, he was so well-behaved and thoughtful. He told me you taught him a lot and treated him very kindly. That made me happy and grateful. This is a small token of appreciation from me. As Leo's mother, Peter has his share as a father. And this is mine. Please accept it. I received 2 payments for a single job. Feeling a pang of guilt, I bought Leo a pile of toys before I left. Chapter 10. The day I arrived in Nanching, the sun was bright, the wind gentle, and the air carried the faint scent of blooming flowers. I settled Victor and Lara into their places and began unpacking. The courtyard had been cleaned in advance and was already spotless. All I needed to do was give everything a quick wipe and arrange the items neatly. While sorting through Lara's belongings, an envelope suddenly slipped out. It was in Lara's handwriting. She had planned to give it to me on the day of our departure, and the envelope had a cheerful doodle of a smiley face, instructing me to read it after she boarded her flight. My eyes welled up as I carefully opened the envelope. Dear Ori, when you open this letter, I'll already be on my way to Nanching, where we'll make our 3rd home together. Fate is truly amazing. Who would have thought the little girl my brother randomly pulled onto a bus would become our inseparable family? 10 years, we've been so close that it feels stronger than any blood bond. I don't really know why I'm writing this letter. I feel like I have so much to say, yet I don't know where to begin. But I want you to understand, life must always move forward. My brother wouldn't want you to stay trapped in the past. He hoped you would find true happiness. In his final days, he quietly told me that he hoped you'd marry someone who truly loves you. Ori, don't be afraid. Open your heart to embrace a new life. I'll always be behind you, your closest family. And the next time you come, I promise the courtyard will be filled with flowers, waiting to welcome you, forever loving you, just as Victor did. Lara ***. My hands trembled as I held the letter, tears spilling onto the paper. I quickly wiped it dry and carefully folded it back into the envelope, storing it safely away. Chapter 11. A month later, the small courtyard was neatly arranged, and the flowers had been planted. 2 little cats lay peacefully in their cozy beds under the porch, basking in the sun. I reclined on the rocking chair when an unfamiliar call came through. The person on the other end said they had stumbled upon my Facebook posts and asked if I'd be interested in publishing them. My Facebook account had been a place where I documented daily life. Starting back in high school, whenever studying overwhelmed me, I'd post a little something to relax. This habit had stopped when Victor fell ill. After that, I never had the heart to pick it up again. The account had remained dormant ever since. I thought for a moment and agreed. Logging into the long-forgotten account, I began to revisit the posts, reliving the story of how we met and the life we shared. Memories fade over time, but scrolling through my posts brought everything back. I was reminded of how vibrant and lively our lives had been. Victor hadn't always been the kitchen master he became. Like me, he started as a kitchen disaster. Once, he nearly set the kitchen on fire, and Lara had to douse him with a bucket of water in the middle of winter. Lara hadn't begun her career in makeup either. She had started with hairdressing. One day, her boss let her practice on him. She turned him into a spiky-haired punk and got fired immediately. And I hadn't been a natural scholar. When I first returned to school, I struggled so much that I scored only 16 points on my first math test. I tried hiding the paper in my backpack, but Victor found it and teased me about it for half a year. Post by post, I laughed until tears streamed down my face. How wonderful it had been. Time is long, but our memories were countless and warm. Picking up my pen, I decided to finish our story, from our first meeting to our final goodbye. In the story, we saved enough money, moved to a windy place, and built a life there. Every breeze carried the scent of flowers from our courtyard, spreading it far and wide. Victor's bright future, the one he always spoke of, was one we ultimately reached together. When I finished the final sentence, I pondered over a title for the book. 4 days. Nothing felt quite right. So, unexpectedly, I came across a phrase that deeply resonated with me. Now I am completely free, with no guilt in my heart, ready to live my life in serenity. I decided to call it the shared years. It encapsulated the 10 years we shared together, the spring and autumn of our lives. After sending the manuscript, I closed my laptop. The weather was beautiful again today. I pushed open the window, letting the breeze in. The flowers swayed gently, their stems bowing under the sunlight. Victor and Lara rested in the golden light, leaning against the wooden frame. I smiled. Victor, Lara, the flowers will bloom soon. On the next windy day, we'll meet again. Peter's epilogue. Victor and I, there's probably a bit of resemblance between us. But that similarity isn't enough to make Oriana stay. Or rather, nothing and no one except Victor could make her stay. She has always loved Victor with unwavering clarity and resolve. That love makes me jealous, but it also makes me admire her. She only mistook me for him twice, both times when she was ill. The first time was 6 months into our marriage. She had taken Leo out for a walk, and a sudden downpour caught them off guard. She used her jacket to shield Leo and carried him all the way home. Leo was fine, but she fell ill, even while sick. Oriana was quiet, never crying or complaining, always enduring in silence. But in the middle of the night, I heard her sobbing when she didn't respond to my knocks, and the crying continued. I decided to go in. She was still asleep, caught in a distressing dream, curled up on the bed, softly crying. I tried to wake her, but as soon as she opened her eyes, she threw herself into my arms. She clung to me, crying out Victor in a voice so heart-wrenching it tore at my chest. It was the first time I'd seen her so emotionally shattered. I had no idea who Victor was, but he must have been someone irreplaceable to her. I could only comfort her, holding her until she cried herself to sleep. At the time, I thought it was just a mistake brought on by her fever. A week later, I found out I was wrong. One afternoon, she had fallen asleep on the couch. As I went to cover her with a blanket, I noticed her phone screen. There was a photo of a man. Half of his face was obscured by her hand, but his brows and eyes looked strikingly similar to mine. I recalled the night she had cried in my arms, calling for Victor. To be honest, I was angry in that moment. No one likes being treated as a stand-in. But then I thought about it. I didn't have the right to be angry. After all, didn't I choose Oriana because she resembled Cecilia? In the end, we were the same, both driven by less than honorable intentions. But fortunately, neither of us had placed unrealistic expectations on the other. I told myself to let it go. Yet, people aren't made of stone. Emotions inevitably take root, and we instinctively gravitate toward those close to us. Daily companionship versus an absent figure, the mind quickly makes its choice. I can't even remember when it started, but at some point, whenever I saw Oriana, Cecilia was no longer in my thoughts. I came to recognize Oriana for who she was, entirely different from Cecilia. Cecilia's eyes were filled with ambition, while Oriana's were filled with life. She was gentle, always carrying a soft smile. Being with her felt peaceful, but I began to worry. The 3-year agreement would eventually end, and when it did, she would leave. After all, her heart belonged to someone else. I privately investigated her relationships and discovered that Victor had passed away. Of course, if Victor were still alive, she would never have agreed to be my contractual wife. The realization brought a strange mix of relief and self-loathing, but all my feelings ultimately distilled into a single resolve: to keep her by my side. 6 months ago, I found Cecilia at an auction abroad. She had changed her name and identity, but she was still the brilliant, ambitious jewelry designer I remembered, bold, beautiful, and fiery. The very traits that once captivated me no longer stirred my heart. We clinked glasses, spoke politely, and avoided any mention of the past, as if we were mere acquaintances. That night, I purchased a diamond ring at the auction. I was thinking of Oriana, but I hesitated to give it to her, unsure of how to approach the subject. When she finally brought up divorce, I thought, so, this day has come after all. Suddenly, I regretted limiting our agreement to 3 years. How could 3 years have passed so quickly? My first instinct was to refuse. Then came avoidance. I didn't want to hear it. Eventually, I offered her the ring, hoping to change her mind. She declined, as I had expected. Still, I wasn't ready to give up. The second time she mistook me for Victor was also the last. She didn't say a word, but when her fingertips brushed over my eyes, I knew she was thinking of him. I must have been out of my mind to let her see me as Victor, but if it meant she might stay, it seemed a price worth paying. Unfortunately, I am not Victor, and that meant I could never keep Oriana by my side.